Greetings and welcome to Office Hours with Dr. G. I'm your host, Dr. G, and I'm so glad that you could keep our appointment. Tonight, my guest is Historian and Moorish Researcher Gibson, who will discuss the Hidden Moorish Legacy of the present, ancient, advanced, global. Gibson was born and raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. She her bachelor's degree and social work in psychology at the University of Maryland in 1989. Since then, she has lived in many different places and has traveled extensively. Michelle firmly believes there would be no mysteries in history if we had been told the true history. Fascinated by megaliths most of her life, her journey has led her to uncovering the key to the truth. She found the star Tetrahedron on the North American continent by connecting the dots of major cities and extending the lines out. Then wrote down the cities that lined up primarily in circular and linear fashion and got an amazing tour of the world of places she had never heard of, with remarkable similarities across countries. This whole process and other pieces of the puzzle that fell into place brought up much information, including a suppressed, ancient, advanced global civilization that Michelle pretends needs to be brought back to collective awareness. And her research in tracking these alignments led her to uncover the evidence for what has taken place here. Those who were responsible and how it was covered up right in front of her eyes. Now, based on intensive research of cities and places in alignment around the world, Michelle came to see that a worldwide Moorish civilization with ancient Moon and Atlantis built the world infrastructure. There were different empires within the empire: Weishaupt, Phoenician, Carthaginian, Barbarian, and Ottoman, to name just a few. But one beautiful, elegant, integrated, unified, and worldwide civilization. I want you to help me welcome to Office Hours with Dr. G, Michelle Gibson. Welcome, 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 Michelle.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing great. Hi, everybody.
Listen, I want to say it is a privilege and an honor to have you on the show, because I was recently, in a conference you participated in. You were a speaker of the conference, and I was in the Zoom room, and I was so fascinated by your presentation that I began to say to myself, I've got to get her on the show. And lo and behold, I was able to manifest your presence thanks to our mutual friend, Cynthia Martin Ale. So I want to say thank you and shout out to Cynthia, and also to you, particularly for taking time out of your busy schedule. I mean, you're blurring in and out a little bit, but we'll get you cleared up there, yes. But I want to thank you so much for coming to the show today. And I know that the information which was fascinating to me, that you're going to share tonight is going to put a different perspective on things, because you have had the privilege to go to places that some of us we haven't dreamed of, because we don't know they exist. So tell us a little bit about Michelle. We know that you were born in this region in the Northeast, but tell us about you and how you got to where you are, to studying Moorish civilization and culture, and the conclusions that you've reached. How did you begin? And start with a child.
Okay. Be happy to, and it's really an honor to be here. And I'm always looking for more presentation opportunities. So speaking is not my first love. I'm a great writer, but I realized when I got this information that I needed to get it out in every way that I could. So I'm totally open to interviews, and I'm getting better at it. It's complicated because I can talk more easily about my life experience and how I came into knowing all of this, and it's a lot harder to present the details of my research easily. And so I'm going to kind of switch back and forth between modalities, but I'm going to recap some of the things that you said in the bio because the sound wasn't that clear.
Okay.
So I was born in July of 1963, and I was raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. So I grew up in Gaithersburg and Rockville. And I lived there until I graduated from high school in 1981. And then I was in college for a year, and then I joined the Army between 82 and 86 so I could get money for college. And then I got out of the Army in time to go to University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And I studied there for 3 years and got my bachelor's degree in social work and psychology. And I worked as a professional social worker and activities director in geriatric care for about 13 years. And I married somebody I'd met in the Army right after I graduated from college in 1989. And then I moved to where he was from, where his family was, which was in Clovis, New Mexico. From the time that I made a decision to join the Army on up to the present day, I've lived a very different life. I haven't done what's expected of me. I've lived in a lot of different places, and it really unplugged me from the matrix a long time ago. And there's nothing about this information that I've been receiving over the course of my whole life that's been threatening to me. I realized that I needed, as soon as I got the totality of the picture, I knew I needed to get it back out. And that's what I've been doing consistently since 2018. June of 2018 will be, is my 3 years anniversary coming up in a couple of months. I firmly believe there would be no mysteries in history if we'd been told the true history, and I have found compelling physical evidence for the layout of the Earth's grid system and a suppressed global civilization. I started becoming aware of anomalies in the environment around me from a young age, so I really believe I was born to do this work. I grew up on a street next to a golf course, and I believe that where the house was on top of a flat-topped pyramid. And one of my first ahas in uncovering this was back in around 2014, somewhere in there, that I realized that golf courses are a cover-up of mound sites. And then I realized there was a cover-up of, this cover-up was, there were key words calling them natural features, and they weren't. Canyons, the whole 9 yards, mesas, rivers even, or canals. Rivers are canals. And this is all to hide everything in plain sight. And I had that realization when I got a map from Brother Umar. His site is hotep.org, I'm sorry, and then there's another website that I think it might be washita.org or something like that. And I got the map, and I noticed that there were mounds at Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. And so this is early in my research, early in my investigations. I looked up Jekyll Islands, and what do I see? The Jekyll Islands Indian Mounds golf course. And of course, Jekyll Island became a hotspot for the wealthy, and that's where the Federal Reserve was formed. So I'm starting to realize that, there's so much more to all of this. I had read somewhere, Newark Mounds Golf Course in Ohio is a special place. The Octagon and Great Circle earthworks at Newark are located on a golden ratio longitude, along with other sites like Poverty Point in Louisiana and Pachacamac in Peru and Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And I had watched a video by a researcher named Carl Monk, who's a mathematician. His videos are very dry, but really interesting. And he has a series of videos called The Code. And he was able to find that there's a correlation between Stonehenge and Newark and other sacred sites on the planet and all their dimensions are encoded in their longitude and latitude, and then they correlate with other places. I mean, it's just this incredibly precise pyramid grid system that the Great Pyramid in Giza is like the centerpiece of this code system, and everything kind of tracks off of that. So anyway, Newark Mounds was turned into a golf course, and so it's like building a golf course on Stonehenge. And there's just so many ways that all of this ancient infrastructure has been degraded or reverse engineered into a control system, and I'll get into that more later on. The enormity of what's taken place is very disturbing, and that's to say the least. But I'm going to share my journey about how I came into my awareness of all of this. When I was a child, around 7 or 8 years old, my dad played for the church softball team, and I wasn't really interested in that. So I would go down the hill into the woods besides the softball field, and I found really large stones down there, and it was fun to play in them. And now that I look back on it in retrospect, that would have been a remainder of the ancient civilization. And these big stones are lying around randomly all over the place. There's really no place that you can't find them if you really start tuning into them and looking for them, especially parks. But I've seen them just along the road and by the sidewalk. So they don't bring our attention to it, and people walk by them and don't even see them or think they're natural, but they have shaped and cut. They're shaped and cut. And then these big stones that I remember from my childhood were in Rock Creek Park. It was part of Rock Creek Park outside of Washington, D.C. And you find rock and stone in a lot of place names and city names. And again, they're telling us something. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. So I was introduced to sacred geometry and the concept of an intentional grid system all over the earth through Drunvalo Melchizedek, starting around 2007, and I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska at the time. Drunvalo mentions a physical earth grid in his 2010 video, Birth of a New Humanity. And he said that was the result of one mind and one plan, with the Great Pyramid at the center of the Earth's landmass being its prime meridian. And at the time, I remember thinking, wow, that sounds great, but who built that? And then around 2015 was when I figured out that anything, like I said, with rock or stone in it is part of a cover-up code. And then words like bluff, a bluff is a bluff, escarpment, anything with the word natural in it, natural steps, natural springs, natural falls is a clue. And then that same year, I realized national, state, and local parks were places where the ancient civilization is preserved. So starting at parks by state, I looked at them and I found megalithic stone walls, falls, mills, canals, and so forth. So that was the beginning of my processes of learning, uncovering this information. Mm-hmm. Let me see here. Here we go. I started learning about the Moors after I met a Moorish American man in 2013. He and I both attended the Unity Spiritual Life Center in Oklahoma City, and he brought the piece about the Moors into my life. I had a real life Moor to show me who the Moors are. Very beautiful being, high level, high consciousness, loving person. And he would send me information about the Moors. He would send me videos with Bobby Hemmett and Sister Roz Bay and Sister Yapa Bay and others as well. And I was really interested in learning the truth. He and I and several other friends visited places like parks and lakes in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And I started to receive confirmation of what I was receiving by physically being at these places. And I started to wake up to all of this when I was living in Oklahoma between 2012 and 2016. And had I not had a Moor in my life, I doubt very much I would have gotten the whole picture. I was interested in megaliths. I was interested in, hidden history. Without a Moor, I would not have been able to put the puzzle together. And once I had the piece about the Moors and the Moorish paradigm, everything made sense. And without that piece, somebody could be doing great research, but they're working from a false paradigm and they're just scratching their heads because they don't get it. And you have the ancient aliens and all that kind of stuff. And I'm grateful that Ancient Aliens is getting some information out to the public, because if it was called Ancient Humans, it would have been canceled a long time ago. So at least it concepts out there, but it still misdirects away from Earth's true history and humanity's true history. One of the friends that I traveled with, so was my friend Osiris, and then two European ladies. One of the European ladies gave me a map of North America. And this was after we had traveled to places like Red Rock Canyon outside of Oklahoma City. We went to Dealey Plaza in Dallas on our way to Rockwall. And nobody in Rockwall knows anything about the ancient Rockwall that's there, but I heard about it from other researchers. And so when I was at Dealey Plaza, up until that time, I didn't have any awareness of Freemasonry really and what that was all about. And I had learned some things about Moorish Masons from my friend Osiris. But when we went down to Dealey Plaza and saw how the layout was, with the book depository on one corner, the jail where Harvey was shot right next to that, and then the place where Ruby was shot right next to that, all close together. I mean, it was like claustrophobic. and from that point on, I started looking up information, and that was when I learned about the evil that is in Freemasonry. And that everything is based on a subversion of the original beautiful, positive Moorish civilization. The evil ones that came in just subverted and suppressed and twisted everything and turned everything into control mechanisms. Fragmented things, split it up. Gave us organized religions, and they had this very elaborate plan on how they were going to divide us and take us down and get control over everything. Same playbook. I mean, we've all been manipulated and lied to. And so now we're living in the time of reawakening minds. So thank you for your show. And there are so many truths that need to get back out into the light of day, so we can heal together, because of the unfathomable number of crimes against humanity that have taken place. And I think it's been in the last couple 100 years. And I'll go into why I think that. But I want to, I see a comment said they had contact with aliens. I believe there was a relationship between the Earth's population and galactic populations. So I think Earth was a part of the galactic community at that time, up until a cataclysmic event occurred. And then because of the evil that came in, I think there had to be some kind of quarantine. That word is a charged word these days, but something to keep it contained because of what was going on down here. But opinions.
Can I interrupt you just for a moment when you say quarantine or contain? When they talk about that there's sort of a I don't know, a frequency or something over the earth, that there's some that are trying to get out, can't get out because there's a level of where you just can't get beyond. Would that be part of the quarantine that you're speaking of, or something different?
It could be. I mean, there's just been so much evil involved in taking control over everything, and including our souls. So some of that could have come from dark tech, but I'm kind of piecing together some things I've picked up over the years. So all I know is it got really bad down here, and we're seeing that that play out. And I'm an optimist. I think we're entering the age of Aquarius. I don't, and they're exposed.
Mm-hmm.
They're more exposed than they've ever been. And I think when we get through this period of time, I think things are going to be better on the other side. But a lot of it, and thank goodness for the internet, because we can connect and bypass things like mainstream news and news sources. And there's other ways of connecting with each other now. So I'm not of the mind that the beings behind this are going to get away with it. I think they're going to be held accountable.
So when you say beings, are we talking reptilians, or we're talking? I know we talked about, you mentioned archons when we when we were, before we came live. So archons and reptilians, we've been hearing that, and there are some that say that those are just covers for maybe more advanced Moorish, beings that were here first. What is your take on that based on your research?
I think the Moorish civilization was doing just fine for a very long time, far longer than we've been told. Thousands of years, millions of years, far, far back in time. And that jealous beings, and Richard Smith calls it the vendetta, the ancient vendetta against the family of man by these negative factions, the reptilians and the Anunnaki and the I think the archons are in there, and I think they figured out a way to hijack the Earth's grid system and take over everything. And I think this happened relatively recently. And I will talk about how I got to that place. But let me tell you about what my research is based on. So one of my travel friends gave me a map, and it was sitting on my dining room table. I don't know if I can get it up close. Anyway.
Yeah, right. You can pull it back a little bit. There. Okay.
That better? Okay.
Yeah.
So I noticed that cities were lining up in lines while I was eating. And because I knew about sacred geometry, I was able to find a star tetrahedron by connecting the dots of major cities. And so the top apex of the tetrahedron is Edmonton, Alberta, and the bottom is Merida, Mexico. And then once I did that, I had to switch from a map to a globe so I could visualize the other side. I'm not a mathematician. I'm intuitive. And so I had studied alternative researchers and earth energy researchers long enough to know that the ancients were very precise with everything. And I can totally verify that. And I do think time travel is involved, and I'll talk about that too. Okay, so once I got that mapped onto a globe, I could see around to the other side, and from that, I've got about 19 spreadsheets of cities and places in alignment. And this is the basis of my research. And once I started, just before I started blogging, I would look up these places and I would see photographs and I would watch drone videos. I mean, I can tell you I saw hours and hours before I even started doing my own research. And I'm looking at everything and I'm thinking, everything's the same all over the earth. How am I going to show people what I'm seeing? Because I can't just tell you this. It's so much more compelling to show you this. And what's evolved is in many ways, my own experience of how I came into this. And then as I do the research, I never know exactly what I'm going to find, especially when I'm not familiar with the place that I'm looking at, which is most of them. But I always find what I'm looking for. It's always there. These characteristics are always there. And I just use the written word to show me where to look. And then when I write, it just flows. I mean, I swear I'm having help from the other side. But all I really have to do is focus my attention, and it's the easiest thing I've ever done. It's just time consuming. The research is time consuming, but the work itself for me is very easy. And so starting in, I'll tell a little bit of a story here. Let me share. Can I share the screen?
Sure.
Okay, great.
You.
There we go.
Is that me doing?
Okay, here we are. Can you see me?
I see you.
Okay, great. All right. So my plan in my head was, once I was able to get everything organized, was that I was going to make one video and blog. And this was my first blog, my first blog post. And I really wanted to know the truth. And I think the universe said, okay, we have a live one. And it came in. I would go look at places and I would get information, and then it was like a co-creator process, and I would get more and more. Knowing that I had to get the information to come out, because the crimes against humanity, the earth, the creator and creation continue unabated because nobody knows about it. And it's been well hidden for a reason by those who wish to harm us for power, control, and energy. And like I said, I think everything is changing, but that's what's been going on. I believe there was a time loop created between 1492 and 1942, and that 1717 was the midpoint year of that, and that was a significant year when I first started looking into the information.
Can you, before you go further on that, can you elaborate on the time loop that you said was created?
I think they created an occulted time loop. And I've attributed it to the Philadelphia experiment, and it sounds kind of crazy, but what's even crazier is what's been going on here. I don't think I'm off base with that. Peter Moon,
the Montauk.
Yeah, he did a lot of work. He talked a lot about Aleister Crowley. He talked a lot about the Philadelphia experiment. He said Aleister Crowley was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. I think he had a lot to do with what's taken place here. I think they figured out something. They time traveled the USS Eldridge in 1942, and I think they created a rip in the fabric of space-time around 1740, because there was an unexplained period of extreme cold in Ireland that lasted for 21 months. And within 3 years of that, Mayor Amschel Rothschild was born in Germany. And 4 years after he was born, Adam Weishaupt was born. And I'm doing research right now, going into depth more about that, because I think that's where the evil came in. And then the Germans ceded the British royal house. It's complicated. And if anybody cares to look at my blog, I've got it written down in a detailed fashion. But they did something where they could come in, create a flood of mud. There's plenty of places underground where people can go. So original people could have been under there when this took place. The beings behind this were under there. And I think they dug out enough infrastructure to restart civilization. And then that was how they took over everything. And again, I've really gone into great detail into how I think this was done.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So in 1942 with the USS well, with the Philadelphia experiment. So I am reading. As a matter of fact, I'm reading that book. When they went back, because I know the ship went from the Philadelphia Naval Yard. It ended up in Virginia somewhere, and then it came back. But when it came back, some of the people that were on the ship were embedded in part, and they said in the bulkhead of the ship, and others were just blithering crazy as a result of the experience. But then they kept whatever they did, they kept it going up until, I guess that book says, like, what, 83, something like that. Montauk, they continue this. So when they went back, when they did that time travel, you're saying they created a rip in the fabric. In other words, they injected or inserted a different time. When some people say, they talk about the Mandela effect, and they'll say in one time, one, this is what he died in prison, and the other one, he was released, and people remember both. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about when you talk about a rip in the time space, or space time rather, fabric?
So when I was doing my research, I had come to believe that there was some kind of relationship between 1492 and 1942. So that they're like numeric anagrams of each other.
Okay.
And I really totally believe that the history that we're taught in school, from a certain point forward, it's them telling us their history, but behind that, it's made up, it's fabricated. And so what we're taught is just, they just try to explain how all the infrastructure on the earth got there instead of giving credit to the Moors where it's due. They call it Roman, they call it, whatever, and it's Moorish. And so they've done this really elaborate number on us to hide the true history. And I'm showing some pictures that have been taken that you can find on the internet if you look up mud flood. And like I said, there's a lot more mud flood researchers than the specific research that I'm doing, but we're looking at the same things. And as soon as I learned about the mud flood, when somebody connected me to it, I realized I incorporated that into what I think took place. And
so
that
did the mud flood cover up the whole, like give another layer, and then they built on top of what was under, what had been flooded over? Is that what you're saying?
I think they dug out enough that they could use it, and that there's a lot of infrastructure that goes down below that. And then you can see, I don't know if it's in this picture, but I've got pictures where there's rail tracks, and the ancient civilization built all the railroads and streetcars and subways, amusement parks. That's all original infrastructure. And again, that's why I really think that this didn't happen a long time ago. This happened relatively recently. The Sphinx used to be buried. It had to be dug out. Easter Island heads have bodies. And to me, it makes a lot of sense that it accounts for how this worldwide civilization of giants was wiped from the face of the earth and erased from our memory. And you see these historic photos, and this is St. Petersburg in Russia, and there's hardly anybody there. The buildings are huge. And there's other pictures like Paris, the same idea, muddy street. And this is in Athens, Greece. And then they tell us, with all of this infrastructure, they tell us it was like this was built at the beginning of like in the 1800s, which is clearly ancient architecture. And then when I looked at what was happening in history starting from 1717, I found the Hanoverian house coming into Britain, King George I. And that was the same time, that marked the end of the House of Stuart. Okay. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in 1717. The Triple Alliance, in order to become King of Spain, Philip had to renounce his concurrent claim to the French throne, and that prevented the thrones of Spain and France from merging together, and ultimately paved the way for the maritime, commercial, and financial supremacy of Great Britain. And then in February of 1717, James Francis Edward Stuart of the House of Stuart, called the Pretender, who at one time was claimant to the throne, left where he was living in France after the Triple Alliance was signed, and he went into exile in Rome. And then I found this picture online that was believed to have been painted of him when he was exiled in France. So he was prevented from claiming the throne. And this is typical of what you find. You find the whitewash going on. So
on the left you have the original, and on the right, is this what who was doing a lot of painting? Like Michelangelo and others, were they making these forgeries, or
somebody was? Because there's sure a lot of them. I found others as well. And then 1717 was the year that the first Freemason Grand Lodge was founded in London. That's a numerological date. On 7/17/1717, the premiere of George Frederick Handel's Water Music took place for King George I on a barge on the Thames. And he was a German that became a British citizen. I was guided through a psychic friend to look at Ireland in 1742 for my research. And when I searched on the internet, I found that Handel's Messiah premiered in Dublin, Ireland in 1742. And that was right after that extraordinary cold weather event that I was talking about. So that's just what's going on here. So Rothschilds come in, Weishaupt comes in, Rockefeller comes in. These are all Illuminati types. And I mentioned Jekyll Island earlier. The Federal Reserve was created. The Titanic went down in 1912, and all the bankers opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve were on board. And then the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law in 1913. Okay. And then, I mentioned the July 17th, 1717. On July 17th of 1917, the reigning royal house of the United Kingdom and its Commonwealth, the House of Windsor, is founded after the death of Queen Victoria, and it's also a German house. And I'm doing research on that right now. It's going to be my next blog post and video. We've got World War II. Talked about the Philadelphia experiment, with the idea that it didn't just become invisible, that it actually went somewhere. And I do think that that there's a connection. They did something. It's my offering as to how it was done, and I might be wrong, but I think I'm in the ballpark. Because what's taking place here is just off the charts bad. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment.
Okay.
Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. What happened to you?
Well, now you came back clear, because you've been blurry the whole time. So I'm glad to see. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. I was trying to give my take on it because I'm reading the Montauk Project book, and right in the very beginning, I noticed that it's written from the perspective of an engineer who got a hold of some of the equipment, or I don't think he was there on that particular ill-fated experiment. But when they say people came back and they were a part of the bulkhead, I kind of envisioned like heads sticking out through an arm, like a person got integrated as part of the metal, like when they dematerialized, and when they rematerialized, some body parts got stuck in with the actual ship components, and then others had their minds or brains scrambled. Is that what you get from that?
So let me. I'm sorry.
I'm talking about from the ones that were on the ship for that experiment. When I'm trying to think if these people came back embedded in parts of the ship. I mean, how did they extricate them, or how did they?
I'm not really sure. I have read about that in the past from a couple of different sources, but something really weird happened there, and I do believe it happened. I mean, other people say no, that never happened, but I think it happened. There's enough sources of information out there to support that. Peter Moon was one of the first people that I came across that talked about the Moors when I was looking for information about the Moors. And Richard Smith was the other one. And I watched Richard's videos on the internet at the time, including European Confessions of the Moorish Legacy. And that's part of how I got to that Human Origins Conference, but it's like a 6 or 7 year story. And so I read what I could of theirs. I didn't read all of Peter's books, but I read a number of them. And then I watched some shows where they were being interviewed. And then I had watched other Moorish researchers. And so I had the perspective of the Moorish paradigm when I really started doing my research. And it's yielded so much information. And I apologize. I mean, this is such a huge subject, and I've got so much information to share. I just invite you to go to my website, piercingtheveilofillusion.com, and just look through it, because I've been doing this steadily for 3 years, and it just gets even, I get something new every time I go to research, and it was an incredible civilization. There is something that I want to read. I'm going to share my screen again, because this is absolutely what I'm seeing that the civilization was like. And then they just, gave us this false construct. And this is it. Imagine a planet intricately laced like the flower of life, with structures and buildings designed to resonate harmoniously with the cosmos, pulsing to the beat of the earth and the heartbeats of humanity, delivering to the living world and the firmaments beyond a loving, glowing resonance, as well as some pretty useful analog wireless energy. The golden age of oneness with all. Anima Mundi, a world not programmed, but tuned and co-composed by the dynamic living harmonies, rhythms, and timbres of all the children of the earth and their majestic built environment, simpatico with the celestial spheres and the cosmos, majestic for the greatness of God, magi, wise one. Someone steeped in this culture would most definitely turn the tables of grubby moneylenders, desecrating temples of love, healing, harmony, and empowerment. And that's from a document that somebody shared with me of his thoughts. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
When
they said something about money lenders, it now brings to mind bankers, even or banksters of today, or the Federal Reserve, would be probably comparable to the money lenders or the money changers or whatever they were back in that time. But the thing that I'm hearing you say is that because they've manipulated history the way they have, there was a lot of technological advances, and a lot of the things that we think I'm thinking they're new today, existed before in the Moorish civilization. Am I correct?
The Moors built everything. Everything. And it was perfectly placed. It was attuned. It was functional. There was free energy being generated and received. Cathedrals were cathodes. People would go in for being harmonized. They weren't I assume mosques also, they weren't being preached to, they were resonating together. And to me, what I read reflects that observation by this other person that sent that to me. It expresses what I feel this civilization was. And if you look at cathedral windows, they're actually cymatic patterns of like solfeggio frequencies.
Oh, actually.
So and you know the tall spires and everything, they were serving some kind of energy function. And the controllers just came in and just reversed all of this to control humanity. They're evil.
You mentioned when we were talking offline that the Moors were preparing, or were at the point, if you were, of ascension. And can you get into that a little bit, when the controllers came in? And
I believe that the Moorish civilization was so far advanced in what it was doing and in unity consciousness, because everything around the earth is just perfectly coordinated. And you had Tartaria in Asia, you had Barbaria in North Africa, you had the Weishaupt, you had in North America, you had the Mughal Empire in India. These were empires that were connected. They weren't fighting each other. That's a lie. And we were connecting with our divine selves, and that's what we were here for. We didn't have the distractions. You know, we didn't have the games with the alcohol and the junk food. Those are all distractions to focus our attention away from what we're supposed to be doing here, which is reconnecting with our higher selves and each other. And the controllers just set up the whole system as a control system. And it's very painful. I mean, what we've been going through, it's just, I've done a series called Looking at History with New Eyes since 1945. And and it goes before that, I mean, what's taken place, like the wars are about destroying the ancient infrastructure and genocide. But even starting in the 80s, the year I graduated from high school, which was 1981, that was when the terrorism started all over the earth, you know, with planes being blown out of the skies and people burning up in stadiums and in theaters, and, you know, this terror and this fear that we've been living with for at least 40 years. And prior to that, it was more localized conflicts, and the civil wars and things were still going on. They were still being promoted by I'm going to call the cabal or secret government. It was being funded by them. They don't care. They didn't care. It wasn't what we're told to get our consent. That lying is how they get our consent. And
if we were so, and I'm not questioning whether we were, since we were so advanced, how were the dark cabal able to infiltrate and overtake? If we were so technological, since we were so technologically advanced, how were they able to bring us down?
That's where I think the mud flood comes in.
Oh, okay.
That there was a deliberately caused cataclysm that wiped the slate clean, and then they rewrote history with what they wanted in there, and wanted us to think and know and believe. And they've been teaching us this. They reinforce it with movies, books, music, and it's a false history. And people, it's amazing that I was able to wake up to this, because I was born into a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant middle-class family. You know, my family is nowhere near to getting this information. I mean, I can't even talk to them about it, which I wish I could. But, you know, everything that they were taught about their family history, like my mom is a genealogist, she loves her family history. And I look at the family history now, and I'm thinking they were lying to their descendants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how I see it. And her great-great-great-great-grandparents were Florida pioneers in the 1830s, and that's when this reset was really getting underway. So I think 1851 was the official start of the New World Order timeline, but that they were repopulating and doing things in the time period before that. So like the 19th century was a very busy time in this new timeline. And once I woke up to this, when I go to Florida now, I see the mounds and the earthworks. I see the Moorish architecture. That's what I see. And every building has a story. So my mom's hometown is Dade City, Florida, which is the county seat. A big, beautiful courthouse with a dome and columns, and a story about when it was built, like late 1800s, early 1900s. It's a story. It was already there.
It's older. So a lot of these, so what you're saying is that a lot of these cathedral type dome buildings, even how about in DC and all that, or were these
same thing? I mean, they tell us with a straight face that the Supreme Court was built during the Depression. If you look at the Supreme Court, it's huge. If you look at Lincoln Memorial, which was said to have been built between 1914 and 1922, and it's perfectly aligned with Capitol Building at the other end. It's BS. And they just lie without conscience.
Wow. Well, I knew they lied. I knew they were lying about, let's say, a lot of the things that we see today. I knew that, but I wasn't sure that the buildings, or not sure. I didn't know that the buildings that we see, so a lot of the structures that we see that have been given earlier, no, later building construction dates were actually ancient buildings that belong or have been constructed by the Moors maybe 1,000 years ago or so or more. Is that what you're saying?
Since the actual dates are lost, I can't really address that. But what I can show you is a good example of what I found. I'm going to go back to my screen sharing here real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to show you some of what I'm talking about along one of the alignments I was tracking, starting in San Antonio. And please bear with me, everybody. I'm sorry, but it speaks to what I was talking about. This is what I found when I was looking in San Antonio to start with. Okay, so this is a series of courthouses. Here. It's said to have been designed in Romanesque revival style by renowned architect James Riley of Gordon, best known for his 18 landmark county courthouses in Texas, 6 of which have been demolished and 12 of which remain. So a lot more has been demolished than remains. Clearly Moorish architecture. This one was said to have been built in 1902 and was demolished by 1953. Brazoria County Courthouse, built in 1894 and demolished around 1930. Moorish architecture. This beautiful one in Waxahachie, Texas, from 1897, still in use today. Moorish architecture. This one in New Braunfels, Texas, from 1898, that's still standing. But that's what they do. There's records for every building. And then the story is usually like there were 3 or 4 courthouses. And courthouses were part of that control system as well. And I saw a question, stop sharing for a sec, can find you. I saw a question about lakes and so forth. I believe the Moorish Masons were master hydrologists, and that rivers were canals, river systems were canals, and that there are many, many artificial lakes and islands all over the world. Now, a lot of the lakes in North America, especially, and I'm sure this is in other countries, but I've studied it specifically, like in places like Oklahoma, which all of the lakes in Oklahoma are man-made. But when I say man-made, I mean they were flooded. And I really believe that there's ancient infrastructure underneath the surface of those lakes. And I know that for a fact at Lake Thunderbird outside of Oklahoma City, because that was the first place I confirmed that. Because I went there and I looked and I saw ancient masonry around the shore of the lake. So I think they flooded a lot of places and just made, however they did it, made these lakes to cover up ancient infrastructure. But having said that, there's a lot of artificially made lakes that were made by the original civilization and islands.
So what do you contend happened to Atlantis? And
I think
Mu and Lemuria and Atlantis.
Really, my understanding is the Moorish civilization originated in Mu, went through Atlantis, and I'm saying it was all over the world up until recently, up until this cataclysm happened. And there may have been a landmass that sank in what's now the Atlantic Ocean, but this was a continuous civilization from ancient times up until modern times, and it's a continuation of the same civilization.
Wow.
Because if you look at Hakim Bey's Journal of the Moorish Paradigm, it says Mu Atlantis on it. But what I'm seeing is that, like when I said earlier, the architecture around the earth is all over the earth is the same. And you see those temple-looking buildings, like Greek temple-looking buildings. I was talking about like with the Supreme Court and the Lincoln Memorial and all these places. And it's not just limited to here. These types of buildings are all over the earth. And again, I've been studying this for 3 years and longer, writing about it for 3 years, but studying it for about two more years beyond that. And it's the same style of architecture all over. And if you think about it, if you remember seeing pictures of titled Atlantis and you see temples underwater, they look the same as these places that I'm talking about. It's the same style. So I think it was all part of the same.
Well, there were some that even say that we were more at one point aquatic, and able to maneuver, if you will, in the oceans as well as on land. Is that have you seen evidence of that found evidence of that in your research?
I'm sorry, one more time. I'm kind of looking at the comments at the same time you're talking. I'm not getting it. One more time, sorry.
Whether or not there's evidence in your research that we were both aquatic and as well as able to maneuver on earth as well, on land as well as in the water.
One of my viewers made a comment about that. I was looking at the Barrier Reef in Australia. I was following an alignment crossing through there, and he made the comment that from what he understood, that was like, he mentioned the term aquatic ape, and I had not heard anything about that until he mentioned it, and it's the same kind of idea about being aquatic at one time. I personally don't know very much about that. And the other thing that comes to mind is, legends of mermaids and mermen, mer people. Nothing would surprise me at this point.
Well, I have a friend, and she was going through, I think, a year-long initiation process, and at one step of the initiation, she ended up. They went to an island that was part of the is it Gullah Geechee area, and they
South Carolina.
South Carolina for their initiation, and they had to go in the water for this part of what they were doing. And she said when she looked over, like beyond, like say on the other side of that like body of water that they were, dipping in. She said there was like a whole string, like a whole line, not string, of men in the water that had come up out of the water, and you could just see, like say from the like the waist area up, but that these were like mermen. And so she had to ask if anybody else saw them. She said they were lined up. They came up out of the water and they just kind of like were in formation during the ceremony.
Yeah, I mean, nothing would surprise me. So many things have been hidden. And I will talk about star forts here in just a moment. But, this whole psychopathic controller thing that came in, they're anti-life, and who knows what's happened to, more people with all this going on.
You mentioned that, they don't have to tell you that they're telling us what they're doing or what's real and what's not, but they just put it in movies and so forth. So I was thinking about, say, even like movies like The Little Mermaid and things like that, or Finding Nemo, or things where you're seeing beings in the water that way. That's their way, maybe even of saying that they know for a fact that that was an ability that we had, that we've somehow, it's been either bred out of us, or we've adapted to just being on the land as opposed to being, in both environments. So I see a lot of that in various movies and so forth. And can you talk with that on that same subject? Can you give us some movies where that they're telling us something without telling us something about the truth?
Back to the Future is probably the best example. There's a lot of stuff about 9/11 and Back to the Future.
Okay.
Research that I've done recently on what I'm working on right now is The Final Countdown. Was a movie about a time-traveling naval vessel. Came out in the early 80s, and I'm speculating that it's predictive programming to, maybe account for the Philadelphia experiment, and my belief that it had something to do with this. Those are the ones that come to the top of my head, but there are many others. That's what they do. It's how they skirt the requirement to tell us what they're doing.
Well, I figured, you see how I can say this without, I was trying to not say words that are trigger words, but all of the zombie movies that came out, I remember saying to Grand Chic, maybe, I don't know, a month or so ago, I said, you know what, I've never, because I don't look at them like that, but how you know that there was zombie series and so forth. And I said, I if you ever saw the backstory, they never tell the backstory that I know of as to how the zombies came to be. And I said, we're looking at it now. I said, we're experiencing how they became what they were in those movies because of what we're going through right now. Yeah. So they told us the outcome, and now they're doing the act.
This has been psychological warfare for a long time with TV programming. I can't even watch TV. It's
hard.
It just, and I haven't been interested in it for years. Alternative videos and YouTube's different, but I can't watch television. I haven't listened to mainstream news in years, but I follow it on other sources. So I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on. But this has been a multi-generational diabolical plan for mind control and brainwashing. And we're also living when we're going into the age of Aquarius, and there's a lot more energy and light coming onto the earth, and they can't keep it hidden anymore. Their plan was for all of us to be like that, but they didn't succeed in that.
Yeah, they're working they're working very hard to get everybody. It's like, oh, they're flip-flopping back and forth. But you're going to need this in order to do that. You're going to have had this done. And I'm like, well, I absolutely just won't do it. It's just, I'm going to be content in my own space, in my own domicile. I'm not going to have to worry about all those things because I refuse to allow it. Even when you saw those movies, there were those who were not infected, and I'm assuming that those are the ones like us who were woke enough not to fall for the need for that. Because even, well, now that you got it, you may have to just get a booster every year. And I was like, what, to boost more until you completely make the switch, until the message in your RNA is completely going over to whatever message they've been sending you to turn you to. So it's just interesting that, we're seeing this stuff, and then all of the different people that they're putting in front of, particularly the Moorish community, the melanated community of, people who allegedly have taken it and have, are trying and urging and encouraging the rest of us to follow suit. I just think it's like, what the hell? You guys are really, 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 really trying to convince us that this is necessary. But like you said, I'm happy for the wokeness that we're experiencing, because I think in another time, everybody would have, drank the Kool-Aid, would have believed.
With your permission, can I show the video of the presentation I gave at the Human Origins Conference? It's about a half an hour long.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Okay. Like I said, I'm a much better writer and compiler than speaker, and I have a lot of information in there I'd like to share with you.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I think that would be good.
Okay. Let me get to there.
And if you all have questions, I think Michelle is looking at the comments and so forth. So if it's about a half an hour, we'll have about, maybe 20 minutes or so for some Q&As, or we can go over a little bit. Okay.
Okay. And connecting with one's higher self, source, universal self, whatever word you. My research following cities and places in alignment all over the world led me to finding out how the original advanced Old World Order was transformed into the globalist New World Order. How did we arrive at the world we live in today? Was cruelty, great suffering, degradation, racial and religious division our inherent nature and destiny? Or was humanity at one time highly advanced, and then the original order of society turned upside down, after which time we have been the subjects of a vast human and social engineering project, not for our best interest, but that of negative beings who want nothing but total power and control over everything? I firmly believe there would be no mysteries in history if we had been told the true history. My original topic began in 2016 after I found a star tetrahedron on the North American continent by connecting the dots of major cities and extending the lines out. Then I wrote down the cities that lined up primarily in circular fashion and got an amazing tour of the world of places I had never heard of, with remarkable similarities across countries. Before I go on, is the sound okay on that?
Yes.
Okay, great. As a result of doing research on these alignments, the story of an advanced, unified worldwide civilization, what happened to it, who did it, and how it was done unfolded in front of my eyes. I have come to believe as a result of my research that there was a hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system after a deliberately caused cataclysm that resulted in a worldwide flood of mud, which wiped out most of the original civilization. I think pockets of original people existed in underground locations, as well as the beings behind this, until enough of the original infrastructure was dug out of the mudflow to restart civilization. Then the Earth was repopulated through human and social engineering, primarily beginning in the 1830s. More on this later. I believe that negative beings were behind the cataclysm and hostile takeover, and have executed and implemented an elaborate multi-generational plan comprised of fallen angels, reptilians, archons, demons, and other negative extraterrestrial races with a negative agenda towards humanity, the creator and creation, all of whom have been interfering on Earth. They had to do it this way because in a free will zone like Earth, the human beings who live here have to give their consent to choose whether to follow the light or the dark. The only way they can accomplish this acceptance, however, is by outright lies, deception, and duplicity, because if people knew the true agenda of these controllers, the majority of humanity will never, ever accept this. What I think is that they found a way to create a new 3D time loop between the years of 1492, the year of the fall of Granada in Spain and the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, and 1942, which was midway through World War II and the year of the Philadelphia experiment, were the boundary years of a new 3D time loop called Rome. The new, what I believe, occulted timeline was somehow inserted, and everything was grafted onto the existing infrastructure on the earth and falsely attributed in the newly written historical narrative. I have speculated that the Great Frost of Ireland was the result of a rip in the fabric of space-time caused by the Philadelphia experiment. If that sounds out there, then why is there a time-traveling naval vessel in the field of information in the form of a 1980 movie called The Final Countdown about the USS Nimitz going back in time to the day before the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941? The Great Frost of Ireland took place between 1740 and 1741, during which time the Irish population endured 21 months of bizarre weather without known precedent that defied conventional explanation. The cause is not known. I think this rip in the fabric of space-time allowed for non-human souls to incarnate in human form, because in 1744, Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in Frankfurt, Germany. He established his banking business there in the 1760s, marking the start of the international banking family and ultimately the central banking system. It is interesting to note that when Mayer Amschel Rothschild died in 1812, the Free City of Frankfurt in the Holy Roman Empire had become the Grand Duchy of Frankfurt in the Confederation of the Rhine after the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved in 1806 during the Napoleonic Wars. Prior to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the imperial throne of the Holy Roman Empire was occupied by the House of Habsburg. Also called the House of Austria, the House of Habsburg was one of the most distinguished and influential royal houses of Europe, and in addition to Portugal and Spain, produced the kings of Bohemia, Hungary, Croatia, Galicia, as well as the emperors of Austria, Austria-Hungary, and Mexico, and principalities in the Netherlands and Italy, also known as the Ancien Regime, or Ancient Regime. The male line died out in 1740 with the death of Emperor Charles VI, and as a result of the War of Austrian Succession that took place between 1740 and 1748, the Empress Maria Theresa had to concede Habsburg lands in Austria, Spain, and Italy to other powers as part of the terms of the 1748 Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, which also confirmed the right of succession of the German House of Hanover to the British throne. This is significant information that I will tie back in as I go through my presentation. Then on February 6 of 1748, Bavarian Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, Germany. He went to a Jesuit school at the age of 7 and was initiated into Freemasonry in 1777. Weishaupt's radicalism got him in trouble with the ruler of Bavaria, and he fled to the Duchy of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg under the protection of Duke Ernest starting in 1784. Weishaupt published a number of works about Illuminism and the Illuminati there, and died in Gotha in 1830, which is also interesting to note because the city of Gotha is the place of origin of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which produced the ruling houses of Europe. More on this in a moment. It is interesting to note that the revolutions of 1830 took place in France, Belgium, Italy, Brazil, Poland, and Switzerland, the same year Adam Weishaupt died in November. These revolutions led to the establishment of constitutional monarchies in France, with King Louis-Philippe I of the Habsburg House of Bourbon as the monarch and last king of France. Notice the differences in complexion of these portraits of him, findable in a search, with the fourth one appearing to be a photograph of a man with a darker skin complexion. The two-tone facial coloration of the portrait of King Louis-Philippe I reminded me of another one I had seen like that. I had seen it with the two-tone face of King Charles III of Spain, shown here. Then these are existing portraits and statues for comparison of King Philip II of Spain, also ruler of Portugal, as well as England and Ireland for a time, and the son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. These two portraits of Emperor Charles V are also available to find in an internet search, again with similar facial structure between the two portraits, with the tilt of the chins and the similar clothing. The 1830 revolutions in Europe also led to Leopold, the son of Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, which soon became the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, becoming King Leopold I of Belgium. One of King Leopold's nephews, Prince Albert, married his first cousin, Queen Victoria, in 1840, who was the daughter of Prince Edward of England and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Another one of his nephews, Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, married Maria II, the Queen of Portugal, and their son Pedro V of Portugal ruled from 1853 to 1861, at which time he was said to have died of cholera or typhoid fever, along with several of his brothers and other members of the royal family. The significance of the marriage of Ferdinand to Maria was the joining of the Portuguese House of Braganza with the German House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. This is its coat of arms, with two green wyvern supporters on either side of the insignia, and the wyvern tail within. As a matter of fact, the wyvern tail section is found in the coats of arms of not only the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, but in other European royal houses it's seated, like that of Hungary, Belgium, Bulgaria, and seen in Prince Albert's personal coat of arms. I could do a deep dive down into the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, but for the purposes of this presentation today, suffice it to say that starting with the War of Austrian Succession in the 1740s, it certainly appears that the different wars and revolutions were all about bringing down the once stable hereditary ruling houses of the ancient regime, going far back in time, whose identity was misrepresented and whitewashed in our historical narrative. New royal families replaced them from the same line out of the Saxe-Coburg and Gotha lineage, with the images of the wyvern, an unambiguously malicious predator in its coat of arms, which therein signifies war, envy, and pestilence, and new forms of government were established, which led us to today's world. More on this later. Other things I found happening starting in 1830 as well in our historical narrative include German Jewish immigrants starting primarily around 1830, arriving in cities all along important waterways like the Mississippi River and Ohio River valleys, setting up shop, monetizing all available resources through the creation of the new economy, including the development of different industry sectors over time, and providing the currency and financial institutions for the new economy. National banks were established between 1863 and 1935 that were authorized to issue national banknotes to banks throughout the United States and its territories. Starting in the 1830s as well, alcoholic beverages became widely available and were promoted for consumption to the general population. Also starting in the 1830s, there was a population explosion of poor people and parentless children, and prominent people, read elitists, in both Europe and America, organized charitable aid movements with a stated mission of helping people find their way out of impoverishment, providing guidance, advice, and at the same time, providing the bare minimum of charitable aid. The prevailing social attitudes of the mid-19th century blamed people for their poverty and applied the notions of worthy and unworthy poor to charitable aid. I even found the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in the Republic of Texas, starting in 1842 in the form of the Mainzer Adelsverein, or Nobility Society of Mainz. One of the founding members of the Adelsverein was Ernest II, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and the older brother of Prince Albert. The Nobility Society of Mainz was organized on April 20th of 1842 as a colonial attempt to establish a new Germany within the borders of Texas through organized mass immigration, and land was purchased via land grants from the Republic of Texas. It was a colonization campaign said to have lasted only until 1853 due to a large amount of debt. On a different subject, I believe pre-existing infrastructure was dug out of mudflows by immigrants from different countries and not built by them, and or restarted in order to be able to use whatever form of infrastructure it was, like canals, railroads, and streetcars, among many other things, and not by the people who took the credit for building them. like the Wabash and Erie Canal in Indiana, with a groundbreaking said to occur in 1832. Its construction completed by 1853 between Toledo, Ohio, and Evansville, Indiana, we are told it was made immediately obsolete with the opening of the Evansville and Crawfordsville Railroad to Terre Haute that opened the same year, and that only 2 flat barges made the entire trip. Dubbed one of the wonders of the world in the 19th century, construction of it using immigrant labor was said to have started in 1836, with the tunnel being hand-dug and black powder blasted, and that more than 6 million bricks were used in the building of it. We are told that after all of that work, and after nearly bankrupting the C&O Canal Company, that by the time it opened in 1850, it was already rendered obsolete by the railroad. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in the United States, the progenitor of the wealthy Rockefeller family, and considered to be the wealthiest American of all time. Along with Henry Flagler, an American industrialist and major developer in the state of Florida, Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870, setting the stage for the mass production of gasoline-powered vehicles in the early 20th century. There's mounting evidence there had already been a worldwide free energy system in existence from the original civilization, including electric streetcar systems, which included residential routes, like this historic photograph in a Charlotte, North Carolina neighborhood. Electric streetcar systems at one time were in existence everywhere, and not just limited to a few places here and there. With the mass production of gasoline-powered vehicles as a result of Henry Ford's assembly lines in Detroit starting in 1913, within a short period of time, like as soon as 25 years, electric streetcar lines were replaced with cars and buses, like the Lightning Route in Montgomery in Alabama, said to have been in operation for only 50 years, from 1886 to 1936. This is the original Pennsylvania station in New York City, said to have been built between 1905 and 1910, and demolished in 1963. Why build a massive building of heavy masonry and demolish it after only 53 years of use? This makes no sense, and was the fate of many of these original railroad terminals. In summary of this part, I believe there was a deliberately caused cataclysm that allowed for the consolidation of great wealth and power into the hands of a few in a hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system and humanity. They created a whole new culture to control us through addictions, distractions, and money, and they do not have humanity's best interest at heart, and I believe they do not have human souls. The original culture was that of the ancient and highly advanced Moorish civilization, which existed until relatively recently. We are still using their enduring architecture. This is Bow Bridge in Central Park in New York City on the left, and El Paso High School in Texas on the right, and their respective dates of construction in our historical narrative. Now I'm going to talk about the Moors and who they are because of what happened to them. The first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroy its books, its culture, its history, then have someone write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. Quoted from Milan Kundera, a Czech writer who went into exile in France in 1975. He published the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, and it was about how the Czechs opposed the communist regime in various ways. Now I'm going to introduce the Moorish paradigm, with the definition of paradigm being a way of looking at something. Once I came into the awareness of the Moors and a worldwide unified civilization based on sacred geometry, aligning everything with each other, including heaven and earth, everything I had questions about started to make sense. The discovery of the North American star tetrahedron and planetary alignments led me to a deep understanding of the Moorish paradigm. All of the infrastructure on the earth carries the same signature and hand of design from ancient times to modern. Moor, M-O-O-R, equals Mu-or, M-U-U-R, equals Mu, also known as Lemuria. The Moors go back in Earth's history to Mu and represent a continuous civilization through Atlantis and up until relatively modern times. Instead of the historical narrative we have been taught, I am seeing that there was an ancient global unified civilization, the Moorish Empire, and that all of Earth's infrastructure was built by the Moors. Since this is not in our historical narrative, we don't even question what we are told about it being built by other cultures or civilizations. Moorish masons of the ancient ones were the master builders of civilization, and their handiwork is all over the planet, from ancient to modern. All of their Moorish science symbolism was taken over by other groups claiming to be them, falsely claiming their works, or piggybacking on their legacy, or given a darker meaning by association with certain things that were not the original meaning. Marco Rodin, inventor of the torus-shaped Rodin coil, unlocked the key to vortex-based mathematics, the template for the universe, from studying Baha'i scriptures. From this, he came up with the number 9, which Baha'i scriptures and other ancient texts spoke of as the most omnipotent number. He drew a circle as depicted in the top left picture, with the numbers 1 through 9 drawn around it. From what he discovered, an intriguing number system was contained therein. This led to awareness that this number system, based on the relationship between the numbers 3, 6, and 9, was the mathematical fingerprint of God. And on the left is a symbol for vortex-based mathematics. On the right is the Moorish masonry symbol that has come down to us as a symbol for Western Freemasonry. Another example of taking over the symbolism of the Moors is the Great Seal of the Moors on the left, with the eye at the top of the pyramid relating to the pineal gland and mankind's journey to reconnect with our divine natures, and the symbol on the right, on the back of the US $1 bill, commonly associated with the New World Order and Big Brother. What is the true meaning of Islam? Islam in its original form is about mastering self in physical form, as well as applied sacred geometry and natural law. It was nothing like the weaponized form of radical Islam we see today that is playing such a divisive and destructive role in the world that is not in accordance with humanity's best interests, by design, I might add. The Moors were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mysteries, according to George G.M. James in his book Stolen Legacy, and still are to this day. Cities, sacred mountains, lakes, and other places worldwide are aligned on a flower of life pattern, and all have the same characteristics. They appear to be bringing the heavens to earth and aligning earth to the heavens. I realized there was a code of keywords that cover up ancient infrastructure by calling them natural features. Words like red rocks, canyons, mountains, creeks, and rivers are just a few examples among a host of landscape features. There are precise alignments that occurred worldwide from ancient times until relatively modern times. This is Keyhole Rock at Viper Beach on the top left at Big Sur in California. The light comes through the Keyhole arch perfectly during the winter solstice time of year in December and January. The Durdle Door near Lulworth, England in Dorset on the top right also has a solar alignment during the winter solstice period. This is Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park in Utah on the bottom left, showing a solar alignment. And Turret Arch, perfectly framed through another archway at Arches National Park in Utah on the bottom right, where we are told there are 2,000 natural stone arches at least. I consistently see intentional terraforming of the earth from ancient times by master builders to create harmony, beauty, and balance between heaven and earth based on geometric principles. Now I'm going to show you only a few examples of the symmetry, proportion, and alignments in architecture, but I have found that this is the case all over the world, including the United States. The Palace of the Kings of Majorca in Perpignan in southern France on the top left, Oxford University in England in the top middle, the Alhambra in Granada, Spain on the top right, where the Moors have a significant presence in our historical narrative. The École Militaire, perfectly framed through the Eiffel Tower's archway in Paris, France. The Hungarian Parliament building framed perfectly through its archways of the Fisherman's Bastion in Budapest in the bottom middle, and St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City through this archway on the bottom right. Here are some examples of buildings perfectly aligned in archways in the United States that I found in my research. Seen through the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Arch in Hartford, Connecticut on the top left, a framed view of the Memorial Church at Stanford University in California on the top right, through the Jefferson Memorial Arch of the Parish Courthouse in Gretna, Louisiana, and the Washington Monument framed between two columns of the Lincoln Memorial. And then you see more alignment of heaven and earth and the reflection of the Washington Monument
in the reflecting pool. These precise alignments did not just happen at certain places and certain times. It occurred worldwide from ancient times until relatively modern times. More examples of what I am saying to follow here, but this is the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn, New York, with the Empire State Building perfectly framed by the bridge foundation. Many know of the famous solar alignment that happens at the ancient temple of Angkor Wat on the equinox, the time of year when the sun crosses the plane of the Earth's equator, and day and night are of equal length. But what about the not so famous alignments photographed at the Statue of Liberty on the top left, Glastonbury Tor in England, depicted with a solar alignment in the top middle and a lunar alignment on the top right, and lunar alignments at the Empire State Building on the lower left, the US Capitol Building in the lower middle, and at the Faisal Mosque in Islamabad, Pakistan, on the lower right. I found the same phenomena of lunar alignment, particularly the full moon, occurring with lighthouses, like at the Pigeon Point Lighthouse in San Francisco Bay on the left, the Walton Lighthouse in Santa Cruz, California in the middle, and the moon rising over the Navasink Twin Lights in Highlands, New Jersey on the right. The Taj Mahal in India aligns with the full moon as well. The famous story of how the Taj Mahal was built goes thus. It was built between 1631 and 1648 by order of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan in memory of his favorite wife. And I find it noteworthy that the Hui Mosque in Yinchuan, China, and the Taj Mahal in Agra, India, have some identical design architectural features. The ancient advanced Moorish civilization that is missing from our collective awareness was all about harmony, balance, beauty, sacred geometry, and unity with each other in the universe, and connecting with one's higher self, source, universal self, whatever word you choose. It was a civilization where each being knew it was sovereign and yet an integral part of the whole collective. It was all about aligning heaven and earth in the fullest expression of human potential that there has ever been here on earth. I have come to believe from my research that the template for the 12 tribes of Israel was an integral part of how the original ancient worldwide civilization was laid out in balance and harmony between each other and the universe, and that Israel was not a specific geographic location. And that the word Zion with an S in the King James Version of Psalm 76, verses 1 and 2, in Judah is God known. His name is great in Israel. In Salem also is his tabernacle, and his dwelling place in Zion. With its metaphysical meaning of Zion, defined as high power, virtue, courage, and strength, was a state of being all of the people of the original civilization strove for, to become united with one's divine self. Next, I will explain why I think Zionism is behind the creation of the world we live in today, and who I think the Zionists really are. And it's much more than what we have been told. First, a review of what we are told about Zionism, a movement to return Jews to a Jewish homeland. The Rothschilds purchased Jerusalem in 1829 and subsequently acquired considerable land in Palestine in the 1800s and early 1900s. The First World Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, which was convened by Theodor Herzl for the small minority of Jewry in agreement with the implementation of the Zionist goals. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion was first published in Russia in 1903 after the First World Zionist Congress, describing a Jewish plan for global domination, but was widely called an anti-Semitic forgery. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was issued by the British government during the First World War, announcing the support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people, written by the Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. Great Britain had been granted a colonial mandate for Palestine and Transjordan by the League of Nations on April 25th of 1920, which lasted until the formation of Israel in May of 1948. A League of Nations mandate was a legal status for certain territories transferred from the control of one country to another after World War I. In this case, territories that were conceded by the Ottoman Empire following the end of World War I in 1918. Despite growing conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, Truman ultimately decided to recognize Israel. David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the modern state of Israel on May 14th of 1948, and President Truman recognized a new nation on the same day. On the same day the new state of Israel was proclaimed, the British army withdrew and gunfire broke out between Jews and Arabs, and Egypt had launched an air assault that evening. The Central Conference of American Rabbis, or CCAR, declared in its 1937 Columbus Platform an affirmation of the obligation of all Jewry to aid in Palestine's upbuilding as a Jewish homeland, and its assertion in the 1976 Centenary Perspective that we are bound to the newly born state of Israel by innumerable religious and ethnic ties, and both were accepted by the CCAR in the Miami Platform of 1997. So that is pretty much what we are told that Zionism is all about, an international movement originally for the establishment of a Jewish national or religious community in Palestine, and later for the support of modern Israel. Now let's drill down deeper into this subject and see what comes up. The Mormons are Zionist as well, and actually say there was an ancient civilization of Israelites in the Americas. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism and the Latter-day Saint movement, believed that the entirety of the Americas was Zion, and that the American tribes were descended from the Hebrew tribes of Israel. Was the founding of the Mormon Church what is defined as controlled opposition? Controlled opposition is a strategy in which an individual, organization, or movement is covertly controlled or influenced by a third party, and the controlled entity's true purpose is something other than its publicly stated purpose. The controlled entity serves a role of mass deception, surveillance, or political and social manipulation. The controlled party is portrayed as being in opposition to the interest of the controlling party. From all of my research, documented in my blog posts and videos, it sure looks to me like the early Mormon leaders were also involved in the creation of the new civilization and narrative, as well as Catholic orders like the Jesuit and Franciscan missionaries, the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, and the royal houses of Europe. And their secret activities involved with the creation of the New World Order were carried out with the involvement of the highest echelons of secret societies, including the Freemasons, Odd Fellows, the Knights of Pythias, and the Skull and Bones Society. I think Zionism is the vehicle by which the world's controllers, known by names such as the Illuminati, Cabal, Globalist Elite, and Bilderbergers, that planned and executed the corporate structure for their global takeover of the world's finances, resources, and people. They are a small number of related elitist family bloodlines, hidden in different nationalities and religions, to carry out their plans for world domination. There is a lot more to all of this, but this is the nutshell version of what I have found in my research. I want to end this by saying I personally believe the world's elitist controllers will not get away with what they have done, and I see that more and more people are awakening.
That's something from the standpoint of your research. It's interesting. I think the most interesting fact that how they take the pictures, you hear it echo. What's going on right now? All of a sudden. So the fact that they would go so far as to change what people look like and change the narrative and do all of this just to and then I would assume there has to be at least a generation in between there, when they would write themselves in. You have to do something with the generation that knows the truth. They get away with that.
I have researched a lot. And so if I'm right, and they created the cataclysm, and I believe that if it wasn't deliberately caused, we wouldn't be here today. There would have been no rebuilding. There would have been nothing. I mean, the plan was so laid out that it has to be intentional. And they repopulated the earth, I believe, by baby nurseries. There's a lot of people talking about that, infantoriums. I think the orphan train movement was involved in this. the memory didn't carry forward because most of the population was young, and they got the adults drunk, and there were all these orphanages that popped up everywhere. And so I think that was what was going on. They were repopulating the earth. They were very disdainful of humans or human beings. Very poorly treated, which continues on to this day. The non-human controllers see people as a commodity. And I hate to say things like food source, but that's in there too, energy source. And I don't like to go into the darker things that are going on, but they're happening. And if you're following alternative information, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with pedophilia and worse, satanic ritual abuse and sacrifice and things like that. I mean, it's not good. And it's just gotten so out of hand in the last couple of decades. It's just starting to come out. I mean, I know when I first awoke to that was a couple of years ago when I was following some people on Gaia.com on the internet. And so I was learning about it, and I think now there's a lot more people that know about it, but it's still not very well known in the general population about what's been going on.
Yeah, and I was looking at the stadium phenomena. I get a comparison between the old so-called Roman Colosseum gladiator sports and the modern day sports arenas and the collection of the adrenaline, the loosh, like somebody called it loosh. So the loosh that we know that they live off of, which now they get it. I guess basically they're harvesting loosh from fear more so. And I know there hasn't been as many arena sports over the last year or 14 months or 16 months while we've been going through this. So I'm wondering. So they've exchanged the adrenaline coming out of the football, baseball, basketball arenas for the fear of dying from from sea. But they still they did it in the Roman Colosseum days, all of the fighting of the the gladiators and the blood and all that, and that energy they literally are harvesting. So what they're living off now, I mean, it's maybe they're changing the way they what they get it from, but they're still because that's their source of I'm assuming it's what they live off of, what empowers them.
That's what empowers them.
Yeah.
And it's very nasty. And my awareness is just expanding, and every time I go to research, I'm finding new information, and it includes the Earth's grid system and the electrical circuitry of the original civilization on the Earth. That includes stadiums and racetracks. And I'm finding geometric relationships between airports and racetracks in very diverse places, where like northeast or southwest of major international airports, I'm finding racetracks and like thoroughbred racing tracks. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're harnessing that energy. They have betting there, they have casinos there, they have excitement there, they have people just like I'll never gamble. I don't have money, but people spending money, and they've just capitalized on all of these features to gain their own wealth. And that's been what's going on. And I do believe it's coming to an end, but that's what's been going on. And, it stops. And for, any language issues and how I'm describing things, my whole perspective has completely changed, and I completely embrace the Moorish paradigm. I have absolutely no doubts in my mind as to the truth of what I'm sharing. So, anyway, it's a learning curve, and it's a learning experience for all of us. But I do want to share that we've all been lied to, we've all been messed with, and we're all in this together. you know.
So how do we get out of this?
I was going to say the only way out is up. It's coming back together. It's living from the heart. And the controllers are doing everything they can to divide us and to cause fear, but they're going down, I believe. And they're pushing even harder now, but they're exposed, and they need to be accountable because they've been running wild for a very long time. And it's like, no, this is cruel, this is brutal, and we've been psychologically traumatized and abused with this unconventional warfare for our minds and our hearts and our souls. And I'm not going to take a vaccine. No way in hell. And my parents have taken it. My brother just took it. And he's a smart guy. He's even a Revelation scholar, but he doesn't see the manipulation behind what's going on. And so he's another one I can't talk to this about because he sees it as a public health issue, and he's doing the right thing by taking the vaccine. And I'm like, hell no, not anytime.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think the people that become the public health issue are the ones that actually take the take the knee. It was, the other thing I was thinking about, this was like last night. There's a banner, not a banner, but a billboard that I see in this area, and I heard it on the radio from the then Surgeon General last year, and I see it still up, and it says CV-19 stops with me. And he would say, this is Surgeon General so, and say with me, CV-19 stops with me. And the first thing that went in my head was, wait a minute, that's programming. Because if it stops with me, that means I have to get it to have it to stop with me. I said, and people are actually repeating these spells that, that are being put out there as something that's supposed to be good, and they don't know what they're bringing to themselves. So with that thought in mind, I was thinking about the prayers, a prayer that I used to pray as a child, and a lot of people teach their children. And this, I'm a thinker, right? So I've always got something coming up there. So last night I'm thinking about a prayer. The one is, now I lay me down to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord, and Greshik always said the Lord's my soul to keep. I'm thinking, if I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And I was thinking, all these times we were asking ourselves to be in the loop, in the karma, in that karmic wheel. Because if I die, because we don't really die, we transition. So I changed the prayer. So I want to share this with you all, my faithful comrades who come on every Tuesday and Friday. So I have a new prayer for you, if in fact you do pray before you go to sleep, before you go to bed. And it would be something like this, Michelle. Now I lay me down to rest. I pray that I have passed my test. If I should transition before I wake, I pray the matrix I escape.
Love it.
So that's because I said I had to redo this so that it's not something that catches somebody in that loop. And that's what we've done all our lives. We've been giving programming loops. We've been given these things, which is probably part of the whole thing. Tell them this, tell them that, make them think it's good for them, have them do it repetitiously, and they don't know. I mean, they're pretty much funding their own enslavement.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're paying for it all. We're paying for our mind control.
Yeah.
We're paying for our poisoning when we drink and when we smoke. We're paying for all of the destruction around the world through our taxes because the central bank is privately owned.
Well, their taxes
by the Rothschilds and their like. So the American taxpayer has been funding, destruction of other places around the world. So they've been very clever as to how they've done all of this, and we don't know it. So their time's over. as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's more of us awaken to what's going on, then we're not easily sucked into and led, through the nose, like, or like sheep being led to the slaughter. Excuse me. And I did a little magazine cover, and I called it Sheeple Magazine. And I had covers, things on it, like on the cover stories, like what is it? Do you ever feel like the wool's being pulled over your eyes, or different things that we talk about when we're being sheep, when we're sheep. And most of the time, people, they see, but I see what it meant when it says those who have ears to hear, or eyes to see. Like, doesn't mean you don't have the little holes there. It means, do you have the insight to detect what you're really hearing, or to really see what they're really showing you for what it is. And most of the times we take things for face value. We are so trusting of government. When you think about what government is, governing your mental. If somebody's governing your mind, then you're out of control. You do not have control of your own mental faculties. And that's what we've got to get back to. We have to, when the premise of reawakening minds is, just like you said, it's based on the fact that we had open minds. It's based on the fact that we're not creating something new, but we're reactivating what we already lost, what we already had. And that's what reawakening means. We had awakened minds. We were aware of our divinity and all of that stuff. And then something came in to upset that. So what we need to do is go back and find, our root, so to speak, our cosmic and, energetic, and whatever we lost, we need to reawaken that. And I think your research goes a long way, because a lot of people would not have the resources and so forth to make the journeys to go to those different, those various places. And so what you've done is brought that to us so that we can actually look at the comparisons. Another thing, and I don't know whether you've looked at this or not, Michelle, is that I discovered maybe about 5 years or so ago that there were lots of old, what they call, I guess they call it medieval art, that they actually would show us these pictures, and they show us the middle part of the picture. But when you now see the whole picture, they would cut off the UFOs that the painter, I guess, painted. That there were like lights coming out of the skies, beaming down. They were telling us it was God, but when you see it, it's like a spaceship in the original.
I've seen some of those.
I think that's so interesting, that these things that we were just assumed, especially me, with my background, going to Bible college and, getting a doctorate in theology and feeling like a dummy. I just feel so used, because when you really learn the truth, all you really do have to do is really open yourself up to say yes to the truth. And the truth says, oh, there's a willing vessel, and truth comes flooding in.
That's my story. That's totally my story. And I'm going to screen share one more time. I hope I'm not lying about that. But my YouTube has grown from 6,000 last summer to 20,200 now.
Okay.
So that's a pretty big amount since in just a few months. But what I want to show you are my stats, because I only have 231 followers on my blog, but that doesn't reflect the traffic that I get. And I get people from all over the world every day. Ooh, Morocco. It looks like this. Let me go to the day before. Get differing views here, but I'm bringing this up because I don't advertise this. I had a really big day that day. I'm not a known person, really. and people are finding my blog.
Would you say it's because they're seeking the truth?
They're getting there somehow. You know, I'm not actively promoting it other than, you know, in interviews and things like that. So to me, that's significant. It's organic, and because I'm looking at some of the out of the way places, my blog post just populates certain places because, you know, for example, I was tracking an alignment through Central Asia, and if you look up Dushanbe, Tajikistan, you're probably going to find some of my stuff. You know, so I'm just saying that because it's like I've gone all over the world with this, and I'm really all over the internet, which is kind of cool. So it's getting out there, and most people resonate with it. I've gotten some hot comments, but most people are resonating with it.
There is some. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I mean, it's just, and even when I first started, I was really nervous because I knew I was going to put it out in the manner that I did. It's like I've got one kick at the can, so I've got to put it out there as truthfully as I can.
Do you get kickback from folks like that?
Not much, really not much. I've gotten far more positive response, far more. I mean, really no comparison.
There's a question here. I'm not sure what about Elon Musk, but there's a question. System Mawu Netur says to ask you about Elon Musk. I'm not sure what she wants to know about Elon Musk. I don't know whether is he a white hat or a black hat.
I have no idea. That's a good question.
What side is he on?
I think he's a black hat, but he's trying to act like a white hat. So really? I'm not sure what that's about. I wouldn't trust them.
What do you think? What do you think about these off-world and off-planet communities or colonies, and how are they there? That those people have put out there, those evil, have they created these off-world communities, or are they using them? Some people say they use them for even when you talked about the various abuses and enslavement, they have people as well as underground. They said they have some off planet that they move around for those purposes. Do you?
I have heard that. I mean, before I did my own research, I was following things like the secret space program, and I've heard about those breakaway civilizations. What I really believe is we do have help from the Galactic Federation. I believe there's a battle going on right now on the surface of the Earth underground. And like I said, I think that things are going to turn, but things are going to have to play out a little bit more, and more people are going to have to wake up because there's still a lot of people asleep. But I really don't think they're going to win. And I'm just going to keep saying that. I can't even think that.
Well, when you think in terms of Mother Kai, who's been one of my guests, she's a very popular guest, and she's like we've decided that we're cousins because our fathers have the same last name. But she tells me, she says, we're here to play. We really came here to play. I know a lot of folks aren't having fun right now, but when you look at it as something that you've put on, like say this is theatrical. We've written the script, and so maybe this time we're playing the good guys being abused, but maybe in the last episode, if you will, we were the antagonists instead of the protagonists. Do you believe in those flips of changes of roles and so forth?
There's certainly something that could be going on a soul level. So that's very much a part of our existence. But to answer a question, somebody was asking who's the war between. The war is between the spiritual forces of good and evil. Mm-hmm. It's what's going on, because the evil has infiltrated everything. But there's good people also that have been working on a plan to down the deep state. And I just, again, I think everything's been accounted for. I think it's been planned for. I think there's a lot of timing issues, but I personally am involved with Lightworker Mass Meditation that kind of does special ops light work.
Okay.
And I just, I think they're losing power, and they're like a dying animal, and they're just like lashing out.
Right.
And using, they have control over media. That's their biggest tool, is propaganda and how they use the media. So with the internet, with alternative information, I never blogged or made a video in my life before 2018. I knew I had to get this out, and I'm not the only one that's doing this for the very first time. There's an army of us that are doing alternative research, that are people that are new it. I don't have any background in video making. I got the easiest program that I could get and learned how to use it. And so my videos aren't very fancy, but I don't need them to be very fancy. I just need to get the information out.
Well, that's how I am. I'll be celebrating 1 year of doing this particular show next month. And somebody invited me on their show. It'll be a year next month. And it didn't work out right. She was still trying to figure it out herself. And so that particular night, when we didn't do our live like we're supposed to, I ended up signing up for getting this software platform. And I said, I'm going to start my show. Probably was in April. When in May, I ended up the next month, I started this. And it's been something that I thought, I was just going to kind of do for fun. But then I realized that the people that log on to to office hours every week, they not only are they coming for something because they're looking, there's so much out there that doesn't give them any, value and so forth, that what I've seen happen in the chat is community, that there are those that are regulars, and they have a sense of community in there. I'm seeing them helping each other. They're always the ones, sometimes you're like, stop that. But for the most part, it's a sense of community and a sense of camaraderie, and it's a sense of getting that information, if you will, and truth out to a dedicated group of people who then can, whatever other needs they have, and now share this. And so I really realized that where I thought I was just doing it because, hey, it would be something neat to do, is something that like I'm drawn to do. I have to do it. I took off like a week or so ago and didn't say I wasn't going to be on week before last. And I heard that everybody was in an uproar. And I was like, darn, but then how important the truth is, and just information, because like you said, you can't get it from the MSM. You're not going to get any, if you look at it. And the only reason why I looked at it a little bit today is because I wanted to see what was going to be said with regard to the verdict, because I kind of already knew, because I know they're heading a certain way. And so it's going to go, but somehow in my brain, I'm looking at this guy's face behind the mask as the verdict's being read. And I'm going, that's no emotion, because probably already knows what the deal is when he goes behind the door. It's like when he goes behind the door, this is for the camera. But when you go behind the door, it's probably a totally different thing. And I just don't, I trust almost nothing that I hear on those channels. So I don't look at them. So I look at I'm looking at the alternative things. I'm looking at, tarot readers who tell you what's going on. And I'm looking at Charlie and Wano Sabin and, Scott McKay. I'm looking at that stuff because at least I know that you're getting intel about what's going on that you're not ever going to get any other platforms.
Right. I follow them. I follow Simon Parks with Connecting Consciousness.
Yeah. Scott McKay.
And so I know the Evergreen ship was a big deal, super huge blow to the cabal. Right. Child trafficking, and there were nuclear weapons on board.
Yes.
They wanted to create an event that caused livestock to die and vegetation to die so they could give us artificial food. So yeah, that's a lot of my confidence, is I do follow that stream of information.
And you followed Tarot by Janine?
Mm-mm.
check her out. Tarot by Janine, Janine. She's in Canada, but she's so on point.
Okay.
She's so on point. So she uses the cards to verify or invalidate what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention a couple of things. Special Ops Light Work, if you go to 144kactivated.org, and I'll send you some links, Dr. G, so you can put it in the description box. The 144K, and we do mass meditations. 144kactivated.org. And if you sign up to join, you'll get emails on when the mass meditations are. And the leader of the meditation group takes the light workers up to beyond the multiverse to advanced light teams, macro level light beings that have been authorized because things got so bad here.
Yeah, that's right up my alley. I want to look at.
So yeah. I'll send that information to you, and then the video is on an unlisted YouTube link because it was my Human Origins Conference presentation. So I'll also send that to you, Dr. G, so you can put it in the description.
Okay.
And anybody that has that link can watch it and share it. It's not private, but it's unlisted. And then I want to give a shout out to my friends Val Simmons and Heather Huggins, who were on the call tonight. I was very privileged to receive an invitation from Dr. Alim El-Bey and his wife Kadira to go on a pyramid cruise with them back in 2019. And so I had a wonderful week, and we had a great time. So hi, Val and Heather. Heather was my roommate, but we got close, and we got to see the ruins around on the Yucatan at Cajon Lake and Chichen Itza, and we went down to the island of Roatan off the coast of Honduras. So spent about a week together.
Oh wow, that's
great.
I had a beautiful sister who has transitioned now. Give thanks to she's now ancestor, Sister Earthy Gates, who's from the Bay Islands of Roatan, and she was fighting for her land. Mm-hmm. And during this P in New York, she transitioned, and but she was a very, very, very beautiful mother from the Bay Islands of Roatan. So I just give thanks for her and the fact that she was able to stay here in my home, visit with me for a whole month, and feed me all kinds of delicious foods that I used to post on Facebook and so forth. But yeah, the things that we just don't know, the places where some of us will never get to go. But when we have people who have or be able to make those journeys and share the imagery and the truth. That's what we need. We need the truth of what's really out there, what's going on. And we need to, like you said, I'm going to end with this, but I want to say that as we, if we would operate from our heart chakra, and start to, whenever you saw the imagery of the Christ or the, whatever you want to call him, Yahshua, you would always see the illuminated heart, which was telling us that heart chakra. That I didn't say heart chakra in churches and so forth, but that's where we have to operate from. When you radiate love, somebody said, "How do you defeat your enemies?" Somebody said, "Love them." Mm-hmm. Send them. Exactly right. Somebody said that they send love to their. I think it was Scott McKay. He sends love to enemies. Most of the ones he sent love to are no longer around. So hey, send love though. Love is the only love can conquer hate. Isn't that what I think Marvin Gaye said? So we really need to be more loving to ourselves and then to each other. And again, Michelle, I want to thank you so much for gracing office hours with Dr. G, with your presence, with your knowledge. Just the fact that you love the Moorish paradigm. You love the fact that you love the truth, and you are a crusader for getting that information out. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the great work that you have done, and I know that you will continue to do to bring us all into this consciousness, and so that we can reverse this, whatever they did, whether we can repair the rip in time or space time or whatever we do. we can fix it. We have to fix it with love.
We've got to come back together again. And when you asked earlier, how do we get out of this? It's like the only way out is up, and it's up in consciousness. It's up in vibration, and you can't solve the problem from the same level of consciousness that created it.
That's it.
We've all been lied to. We've been manipulated to get to where we are now. And that's a primary motivation for me to do this work, is to get this information about the Moorish civilization back out into collective awareness, so we can begin to make different decisions and think differently about each other, and heal, because we truly need to heal. The abuse has been off the charts.
We do need to heal. And I always forget to say this, but if you did not press like, please, you know, give us thumbs up, and please share. And if you're on here for the first time, please subscribe to the official House of Real Awakening Minds channel. We really appreciate that. You know, we're here on Tuesdays and the first, second, and third Fridays. I'm shouting that out right now, because y'all know I don't do 4 Fridays. I need time off sometimes. And this particular month we have five Fridays, so you may not see me until the first Friday with Grand Chic, but know that, you know, we all need to have some time to do some personal things. So I love you so very much for you all being the faithful crew members, if you will. And Michelle, I thank you for, I feel like I've gained a new sister friend, so appreciate you and all that you bring. And I think that's it. I'm going to ask you.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's all important. And I will send you those links so you can put them in the description. I assume this is going to go up on YouTube.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's being recorded right now for YouTube. So I kind of see if I may have to put it in the comments, because I never figured out how to go back in and edit to put it in from the platform that I use. But I'll see if I can. If not, I'll go in and put it in the comments for YouTube. Okay, but it's actually, as soon as we log off, it's going to be up on YouTube. Actually, I don't have it's being recorded and it's there. So the same link that I sent you, you can share that link. So the link that I sent you for the YouTube is the same link that for the replay. So again, I'm just going to see if there are any more comments. Again, and thank you so much, Cynthia Martinelli. You're a sweetheart. Thank you for making the connection. Let me see. Yeah, let's get it. 1 for frequency power nodes in the building. Okay, all right. Yeah, so everybody needs to go over there and sign up, because we need to be radiated. I want that. I used to lead meditation, but it's one thing to lead it for others, but I want to sit in a meditation and be, you know, and I want to actually close my eyes and go higher. So I'm going to be over there. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. It's very powerful, very effective.
I can't wait. So when is it now? Is it out? When did?
Well, I think the next one's going to be around the time of Beltane. We've had several this year, but it's very effective in transmuting non-physical darkness, which is a huge problem. Non-physical darkness is a huge problem.
Wow.
Physical darkness is a big problem, but non-physical darkness is major, because most people don't realize that they're interfering, that non-physical spirit is interfering. And
wow.
The cabal does rituals at the same time usually, so the meditations shut down what they're doing and clear, you know, whatever's
going on. Someone is asking why darkness is a problem.
It's a problem because so many people on the earth don't realize that there is non-physical darkness and physical darkness, the ones that have incarnated. And so they don't see it as the problem. And it's a huge problem, because it's holding back our development and our ascension, what they're doing with their
technology. Would that non-physical darkness be within beings, or is that?
It can be. I mean, it's both in different planes. I mean, like they kind of hide out in these temporal bubbles. I mean, evil has had a field day down here, and brought in a lot of demonic elements and things like that. And so this is to clear that and to accelerate planetary liberation and ascension, because we have been held back by it. And a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been saying this or seen it, because I'm intuitive, but I'm not clairaudient or clairvoyant, so I don't see things and I don't hear things.
That's me too. I just know things.
Yeah, I just know things. And so, but I'm close friends with the people that are headquarters of this meditation group, and what I've experienced with them in the last few years has me a believer that this is a real problem. And they try to take out light workers and advanced souls that are here to do the shift. They want to debilitate them, and they've been able to get away with it. But with the efforts of groups like this one and others, I mean, they've been transmuted.
That's good.
But they're still like hanging on by a thread. So get that
well,
over.
we have to learn. We have to learn a little bit more about that, because I know that there's a shaman that I kind of follow, and he was talking about even spirits that have passed over, that crossed over, that haven't crossed over, that attach themselves to living beings and start to influence them. And sometimes it's a lot of negativity. And so you have to learn how to cut those cords and ties and send those, beings packing. So gotta learn that stuff.
And I just want to respond to a comment by Amin Bey. I am going to send Dr. G the link for that video. It's unlisted, but she'll have it and she'll post it somewhere so people that watch this tonight can have that. It's not private, it's unlisted. So anybody that has the link can watch the video.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure. I will probably have to go back and post it. If I can't figure out how to integrate it back into the description, I'll have to I'll just post it as a comment link. But I'll do it. I'll get it up. So thank you again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody.
Yes. So we're out of here like normal. And I didn't have to. Your time. You were the first one. Sheldon say this as we close. Normally, my music plays, and I'm giving. I know you said you couldn't hear me. Maybe it was a little bit too loud. But when I'm doing the announcement of the person that my guest, there's always music left over, and so you have to kind of like rock with me while it's because the music is still playing. You were the first guest I've had that it went right to the very end. And as soon as I got to the end, it was time to bring you on. Even though we won't see you doing it, you can rock out as we close, because I'm going to put this up here. All right. Thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.